Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, we spoke with Quin Wills about his time at the Mayo Clinic, his collaboration with Novo Nordisk, the founding and evolution of Ochre Bio, and their decision to pivot towards a more traditional bioinformatics approach. Quin also shared insights on navigating a global financial crisis and shifting company focus in order to survive. If you missed it, be sure to go back and give part 3 a listen. In part 4, we talk with Quin about the role of empathy in organisation and team dynamics, emphasising the need for respecting diverse perspectives to boost collaboration and innovation. We also explore Ochre Bio's unique journey through Y Combinator, their innovative strategies, and the critical importance of adaptability in the shifting biotech entrepreneurship landscape.
JP Morgan. So we're gonna make this a JP Morgan story.
Yes.
So we went out to JP Morgan. At the same time, Jack was like, we're out there. We should put in an application for this Y Combinator thing. I was like, why? Oh, I don't know. But we did. And we were at JP Morgan, and then we went, and they said, no, come and give us a chat. And we went there, and it was very busy. There were a lot of people there. And we learned that the day we went for our interview was the first day of that intake, that cohort at Y Combinator.
Oh, wow. And
they chatted to us for about 10 minutes. And they're like, don't pack your bags, cancel your plane tickets. You're going to stay here for a while. And you're going to do Y Combinator. And credit to Jack for really pushing that one, because it was a good decision to make for us. It was lovely to be just in that kind of space, high innovation, people who are very networked, who can really connect to, again, great mentors, great sponsors, and to just really help you accelerate your ideas and get on with stuff.
That's amazing. And I love that you're co-founder. Like, that's a healthy co-founder relationship where it's like, you can push each other. Like, my co-founder. My co-founder does it to me too, so
it resonates. It was a really great idea, and credit to him for making that one work for us.
That's awesome. So you go through the Y Combinator program, and obviously via that program, for those who are not aware, Y Combinator, like steel sharpens steel. It's like, you really get things dialed in. From there, I guess when you were, I'm sure it has evolved since then, but as you were founding Ochre, what were you seeing? Like, what was the status quo of the market? Why was it that way? And how did you seek to disrupt that status quo?
So for us, it's like any company, we didn't go in with like, we're going to do all free. We're going to be a full stack company, full stack solution, I think is the
out the gate.
The IC term, right?
Yeah.
And so seed funding was the discovery story, and building an enormous initial data set and other data sets after that, but a critical mass data set. The Series A story was about the validation platform stuff, and now going forward in things we hope to announce in the not too distant future, that'll be about more translational paths and where we go with stuff. And so at those days, then it was just about how can we generate a very meaningful discovery data set that's like nothing else, that can then give us the critical mass to take things to the next stage. And Y Combinator really pushed us to get that data, that at least get proof of concept data, get the initial funding, and then sort of expand on that.
That's very cool. And it reminds me of like our when we touched on earlier in our conversation about, scientists oftentimes want to have the perfect solution out the gate, the full stack out the gate. But it sounds like this was, it was much more of like blocking and tackling. It's like, get the data, like get the data first.
Yeah.
Like, let's not try to boil the ocean. Like, you know,
know the journey. I think that is, again, I'm going to be very careful of giving out too much advice because that's always dangerous. But, but really, like it is, if anything, knowing the journey is far more important than getting the idea perfect.
Absolutely. And look, I always think about like, this is like, there's a million ways to make $1 million. And, you know, sometimes there are those people that just like hit a grand slam, like on the first pitch. You know, and that's one way to do it. But, you know, there's always other ways to do it as well, where you kind of like, you build into it and you kind of you build, like you kind of stack and build on the foundational layers.
Absolutely.
So you know, with the seed funding, you're getting your data. Can you talk a little, well, I know you have locations all over the world. And so where did Ochre first start, and how did this kind of like expansion of the team and locations come about?
So we were, in many ways, we are very much a Californian company, because of course the Y Combinator experience. The important sort of footnote to all of that is we were the Y Combinator cohort that were cut short because of COVID. I was there watching San Francisco turn into a ghost town and the panic shopping. It was unbelievable. And so then the decision was, right, we did our final presentations virtually. We very quickly jumped on a plane back to the UK. And really when we set up because it was the Oxford side of things that was set up first, a lot of that was done virtually. It was, wow. I would not recommend it to anyone. Never start a liver fusion company during a major pandemic when there's nothing available to do. But it was, I mean, there were members of the team that we hired that I was working with for a long time before I met them in person, because we were just being so careful with COVID and what was going on.
Wow. Okay. And so you're back in the UK, and that was kind of the home base, and you're in the thick of it. It is pandemic, like, you know, no one knows what's going on. And when did you decide it was time to expand? You know, I know you're in Taiwan, you have a location in New York. When was that the kind of like, it is time?
It's a needs must thing, really, rather than we Asia. I mean, we do celebrate this, and having sort of a lot of ethnicities represented in our data is something that I'm very proud of. The truth, though, is of why we did it the way we did it is that when you're doing primary human tissue research, certain places are better to do certain types of research at. So in the US, because of the way organ procurement works and the structures out there versus the UK, it is much easier, by an order of magnitude, much easier to do that kind of research out in the US. Taiwan, this in fact was one of my Novo Nordisk colleagues who moved back to Taiwan, and she reached out to me and said, well, should we explore some opportunities out there? And we realized very quickly just how, because the Taiwanese healthcare system in some ways is very, so I recognize it very similar to a lot of how the NHS works. It was incredibly, I shouldn't say incredibly easy. This takes away a lot of hard work that she put into it. But to set up these incredible clinical networks out there where we can then get, you know, fatty, healthy, cirrhotic, cancerous biopsies of livers, bring them to the lab very quickly, turn each biopsy to 50 slices, master how to keep these slices going for 5 days, which these are all world firsts, you know, in terms of disease tissue culture, and then turn that into a platform that we could work with. And so Taiwan is just incredible for that. It's incredible innovation. And it's not just that they've taken over a lot of the single cell genomics that we do, you know, because they're just so good at working in tissue work, you know, doing tissue work, a really smart team with the kind of data that comes out of that. And so that just has been a beautiful nidus of experience that's developed there. New York remains our final gate where we check things out, fuse livers, and I don't see us moving away from the US anytime soon for that, because that is just such a great space. Yeah, it's expensive. The US is not cheap to do science in, my friend.
Especially New York. Especially New York.
Well, you know what? It's not actually. It's in many ways cheaper than Boston. unbelievable as it might sound. You know, Boston is a tough place to set up a lab these days.
Yeah.
It's a very saturated market, right? And so New York, in many ways, is not it's not that much more expensive. It's cheaper in many ways, and has the right talent. It has great hospitals there, very incredible sort of transplant hospitals in Manhattan, and so just was a great ecosystem in which to do things.
That's awesome. And it kind of like seems like there's like this serendipity to, you know, kind of these like evolutions of Ochre. And could you, I know you have many different types of labs and you're leading a bunch of different teams. Can you just like give us like a day at Ochre? Kind of like what is that for you? Sorry, that might be a loaded question. Sorry, I know it's a lot.
No, it's a very, well, you know, because of course 90% of it is people stuff rather than science, to be honest. Yeah. But I think maybe just to give you a sense for how things are structured scientifically. And again, I'm not going to shout. We think this is a good idea. Let's see what happens when we get to the clinic, right? Yeah, and then when we get good candidates coming to the clinic, we'll be a bit more shouty about the Ochre way of doing things. No, it's so invest heavily in great discovery. So that's and that's largely the computational team, the big data sets, the kind of stuff we set up. So invest heavily in great validation. And so it's the 3 biology platforms, very complex primary cell culture methods here in Oxford. It's a traditional target validation, but furthest removed from biology. And then of course, Taiwan for tissue biology, and New York for organ biology. You have to invest in a chemistry platform. We're a therapeutics company. So we have like a GMP level lab of huge machines. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Like the chemists take up a lot of space.
Absolutely.
They tell me they need it. So they And so, you know, invest heavily in that. And then something that I think that is we're quite proud of, that's quite uniquely Ochre, is we have a separate function called XLAB. Oh, sounds again very, very California. And the whole idea of this is we don't want to completely separate the company into production and innovation, and that, you know, it just, again, that's going down very matrix style format, blah, blah, blah. But we do recognize that there are critical path stuff that needs to happen. And then there's every time there's a new idea and that's very high risk. So there's a new technology out there that somebody's got that we want to try out, we want to bring in. And that is the XLAB function. The XLAB function really focuses on new modalities, new indications, achieving better scale with whatever we're doing. And so the whole idea is to proof of concept something, and you basically set up a little team around that idea, proof of concept it, and if it works really well, you roll it out. And it's really the XLAB idea that gave us our big hits in cancer, because it wasn't a theme we were really thinking about as a company. And it gave us 1 or 2 really interesting projects that we'll be making announcements on later this year.
Wow, that's super cool, because like I love that idea, and I'm trying to like figure ways to like borrow that kind of like abstracted concept and bring it into Exceeder. It's kind of like this. It's like a sandbox. It almost feels like a sandbox.
A skunkworks in many ways. It's like a little mini skunkworks. And it's not to say, because I'm very careful to say it's not like the XLAB kids are special kids, because it's actually a virtual function, right? We can pull in people into XLAB. XLAB still helps other teams and stuff. But it's just about having a little bit more, is labeling, tagging certain projects. Those are XLAB projects. And that means a certain amount of low bureaucracy around it. Just get on with it, solve the problem. If you haven't solved it after 3 months or whatever the case may be, kill it, move on. There are lots of other potentially new technologies you want to bring in. And for us, it seems to work well as a model.
I mean, I can see it. I mean, at least I can see how it is beneficial, because I think without kind of this like kind of room where it's just like, hey, you don't have to do, like, everyone comes in and knows kind of what their normal sets of responsibilities are. But when you're working on an X project, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that you're just like, hey, the normal rules don't apply here. And you can feel free to like just like get creative And that's where the kind of the most, innovative stuff can blossom, and doesn't get like kind of, stifled or the air sucked out.
Exactly. No, you can. But important to note, it's not this complete blue sky. It's still got to be value-driven innovation.
Yes. Yeah.
There have to be metrics. And the way maybe just the easiest way to explain that is I talk, there got to be metrics of success. How do we know this is good?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Totally.
it's got to be that. It can't be just like tinkering forever and ever and ever. And who knows, this is cool. Let's just play with this. There has to be like, this is going to allow us to target these cells, or this is going to allow us to do X, Y, Z.
Very cool. Very cool. And looking back on the kind of the past 2 years, and you talked about like these various phases and like kind of like eras for Ochre, where you have like your seed stage, your Series A stage. Can you talk a little bit about your fundraising journey, your philosophy behind it, and your experience? I know the past 2 years has been super difficult for the life sciences. And how do you navigate something like that? And how have you, are there any unconventional tips that you have for anyone who's embarking on that? Just love to hear your thoughts.
Don't.
Yeah.
Why don't get into biotech. It'll kill you. It's don't do biotech during a pandemic. Tip number one. Don't do biotech when there's a global economic meltdown. Tip number two. Both of which we've done. So and here we still are. I think and again, credits to Jack as a co-founder in all of this, is that for us, there's always been this path. We had this idea of where we want to go. And, when things start getting very frazzled around the edges, the path keeps you going, right? And I think that has, let's see, you're still a young company. Who knows what the future holds? It could all go bang. It's not going to. But, it's having that clear sense for where this needs to go. And maybe this is a topic of focus, because this is something that investors complain about all the time. You need to focus. You need to focus. You guys are trying too many things. Focus. Get something. And I think there's often a confusion. Feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like there's a lot of confusion sometimes about what do you mean by focus. Because doing a lot of things is not a loss of focus. Ochre does a lot of things. I think for me, loss of focus is two things. It's not knowing the journey this needs to go on, because if you don't know where it needs to go, you can't be focused. Full stop. And I think a lot of biotechs struggle with that. And not knowing how to kill things quickly. You mentioned this. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to this. It just comes with personal experience, I think. And even then, there were times that I've really not done well at that in Ochre, but learning how to cut things very key. If you get a lot of things, ideas, and play with a lot of things, you've got to learn to kill quickly. And knowing how to kill quickly and know that journey, I think, is so important.
That totally resonates. And I actually don't disagree. And I speak my close friends with Jake Glanville, who's the first episode of the podcast, but he talked about it as like he calls it the respiratory model, where you like kind of like inhale and you do a bunch of things, but eventually you need to exhale and kind of like prune things back, and it's focus time. But it's kind of like giving yourself the ability to cover breadth and explore generalist concepts, see how things are interrelated. But there eventually comes a time when you need to like lock in and dial in. So totally resonates. And another thing that really stood out to me too is the path, the journey, the knowing, like when things get like, if you have your eyes on the prize, it makes getting out of bed and running through walls, these proverbial walls, that much easier, knowing that this is what we're all shooting for here and it's worth our time. And there are certainly times at Exceeder too where there's like, oh man, this is a hard one. Like this is like, and
we've all been there.
And you're just like, if it weren't for our ultimate mission to support scientists do their best work, I think I can like definitely remember times where I would have just thrown the towel in, and it would have been really hard. Thankfully, I've not thrown the towel in, But I think that's critically important. It sounds very like fluffy, you know, but I think it's really important for anyone who's embarking on that journey is to like find your why. Like, why are you doing this? And everyone has a different why. Like you know, and I'm not going to tell anyone like this is why you should do it. It's like, no, that's for you to decide. But that everything you're saying really resonates with me. And you know, now that you mentioned that you have some really cool things on the horizon, obviously you don't have to say anything that's confidential or anything like that or like that. But as you're looking 1 year, 2 years out for Ochre and yourself, what's on the horizon? What are the goals for you and your team?
Oh, what can I say? I think people are going to see an important evolution in Ochre this year. We, you know, up until this point, we've been doing a lot of building the jumbo while it's taking off. To get to leads, you know, that we want to take forward, to get to shaping ideas around which models are really delivering, which aren't, that kind of thing. And I think we're in a position now where we have a far clearer idea of what the market wants. So where therapies are going in a very quickly evolving space now, that is liver therapies, where we could fill gaps with what we do, and the kind of big, our chairman talks about your big brave. What's your big brave is going to be, and what our big brave is going to be for the next 3 years. And we'll say, watch the space. We'll be making announcements in the not too distant future.
That's awesome. I'm really excited. Like I will of course be staying tuned in and can't wait to hear you. And Quin, you've been super generous with your time. Honestly, this has been a blast.
Oh no, thank you.
And just so much fun being able to chat with you. And for the podcast, we have 2 traditional closing questions. The first being, would you like to give any shout outs to anyone that supported you along the way?
To everyone who's been patient with me. not least of which is my partner. We had my life partner. We are in very different parts of life, in the sense of, he's a creative, I'm a scientist, and it is not easy being in a relationship with somebody who is in a startup. It is frustrating as heck, particularly if you don't understand the industry. So big shout out for just having the patience of a saint.
I talk about it, you know, with friends and also just at the company, but likewise, my wife has been on the Exceeder journey. It's like since the beginning. So like since 2011. And part of that, you know, I was talking about like throwing in, like the prospect of throwing in the towel. A lot of the time, you know, my wife was actually the one who's like, no, like keep going. And I think there's something about that is incredibly important. One, having someone that's supportive of you and also who can kind of like pull you back from the edge when you're there is so important. And I think way just not talked about. So that completely resonates with me. And then the last closing question, if you can give any advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
So, you know, it's quite customary in podcasts for people to ask for partnering advice. And I'm going to give the same bit of advice I give every single time, even to my 20-year-old self. And that is, be careful of the advice you take. And I know that sounds like an unusual one to do, but I think one, and I'm speaking to myself too, right? You know, chatting with you and sort of giving snippets and insights, is that you need to be very careful of believing your own nonsense. And there are a lot of, you know, it's so easy to be an expert these days. You know, you can just switch on any social media platform and everyone's an expert on everything, which is possibly why we're having such a disarray in the world at the moment. And you know, and Vino Kozler, who's behind our original funding. I'm going to misquote him now because I can never get it quite right. But he basically says one of the toughest things in life is to learn who to listen to and at what point. And it's not about being arrogant. It's not about being stubborn. It is about recognizing that, again, like you say, things are so multidimensional. And it's not about life just for some people having bad advice. It could be really well-intentioned and good advice, but it's not the right advice for you in that particular moment. And knowing how to make that call, I think, is something I would tell my 21-year-old self to work a lot harder at early on in life. Because if I learned how to do that early on in life, there'd be far few people out there who'd have to be patient with me.
Yeah. No, totally. And honestly, I think that's great. Like, I mean, it's the advice, but anti-advice kind of a paradox.
Advice not to take my advice.
Yeah. But I think it's incredibly important too. Well, Quin, thank you so much for your time. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our 4-part series with Quin Wills. Be sure to tune into our next series, where we chat with Mark Cotter, neurosurgeon, stem cell biologist, and CEO and founder of Bit Bio. Spun out of the University of Cambridge, Bit Bio is an award-winning human synthetic biology company, providing human cells for research, drug discovery, and cell therapy. Bit Bio applies a patented harbor-safe gene-targeting approach to inducibly express transcription factor combinations that reprogram human-induced pluripotent stem cells into highly defined and mature human cell types. To date, they have raised approximately $200 million from investors including Arch Ventures, Foresight Capital, Milky Way, Charles River Laboratories, National Resilience, Tencent, and Pure Capital, among others. In addition to founding Bit Bio, Mark is also the co-founder of Meetable, scientific founder and chairman of rejuvenation startup Clock Bio, and co-founder and trustee of Myelopathy.org, the first charity dedicated to a common yet often overseen condition causing a slow-motion spinal cord injury. Outside of his vast experience in industry, Mark has also been a professor and researcher at Cambridge for more than 15 years. His diverse experience as an academic and serial entrepreneur offers a wealth of insights aspiring scientist founders can draw from. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.